Good evening. I'm Nancy Ford, president of the Memphis chapter of BDPA. Welcome to the Business Computing Show. Our guest this evening is Ms. Chandy Littlejohn. She's the Vice President of Education for the Memphis chapter of PMI. Chandy, what is PMI?
PMI is basically the Project Management Institute. It's an organization that promotes project management standardizations, processes, standard languages between project managers.
And what is project management?
Project management, it's a funny story. My daughter asked me the same thing when she was about 6 years old, and I started telling her, well, it's a standard process. You have phases that you go through. You have a unique output. You usually have a product or something that at the end of the project that you have delivered. She said, what does that mean? I said, well, after going through this elaborate, explanation of what project management was, I said, well, simply whenever anybody needs something done, they call us, we get it done, and we, have a certain level of quality, and we do it right the first time.
Okay, so actually project management is something that most of us do then, huh?
Every day in your life, you manage a project somehow. If it's making a list to go grocery shopping, one of the things that I use as an example is baking a cake. That's a project.
It is.
So.
Yes. So, but in terms of the workplace, what is the typical day like for a project manager?
Well, the typical day, a project manager is responsible for about 90% of the communication for a project. They liaison between the actual people that are delegated to do the work, to deliver the and the stakeholders. They communicate out to the stakeholders. They make sure things are done, do reporting, resolve any conflicts, keep up with any risk associated with not completing the project on time, within budget, or even the scope of the project, making sure the scope of the project is completed too.
So now you threw two words in there that some of our listeners may not be familiar with. One of the words is scope, and the other word was, I've forgotten. Tell us what scope is, and I'll remember the other word while you're telling us what scope is.
Scope is what you want, what the customer wants. Basically, the bottom line is, if I want pot roast for dinner, the scope of my project is I want meat and potatoes, or meat and potatoes and carrots. So it's simple things like that you can relate to what the customer wants, what I want.
Okay, and you same dinner example, tell us what a stakeholder is.
A stakeholder?
Is that somebody who's actually eating a steak?
If it was that easy. The stakeholder is a person that is impacted by the project. They could be the people that sponsor the project, that they want the project to get done because they have a business need, or they benefit in some way from the project itself.
So some of these projects, I believe, can be very large, right?
Right.
And how do you keep your team members motivated?
That's a difficult thing, because when managing people, you always have people issues. But to keep them motivated, you have to set ground rules, and that's a big thing with PMI is set ground rules. Have expectations for your team members. Tell them what their expectations are. If they don't have expectations, they don't know how to manage to those expectations, as well as team building exercises. I was in a recent class where we did a PMP exam prep course, and one of the students said, we throw a party, get to know people personally, know what it takes to engage that person personally, and work with that, know their strengths, and that's how you motivate. You take the time to learn how that person reacts and just understand them as a person.
So when you're a project manager, you're actually a real person as well, so that people aren't just numbers.
Right.
And I understand you work for First Tennessee Bank, where you all probably deal with a lot of numbers.
Right, but people are how you get things done.
So how do you build support for a project? Because the lower managers always want something, and the upper manager, the people who pull the purse strings, always say no. How do you build support for a project that may be a large project that may cost a lot of money, and how do you convince upper management that it's worth the dollars?
Yeah, basically, if you don't have upper management approval or buy-in, that project won't succeed. So that's critical, is having upper management buy into the project. And that's a business sponsor needs to let everybody know, like upper management, what's the benefit of the project? What is the associated return on the investment of doing the project? Is there a compliance issue that's requiring that project to be done? Is there a customer issue that requires that project being done? It takes communication and proving that the project is worthy of getting done.
So in that case, you become a citizen as well.
Exactly, exactly.
So once you've gotten approval for the project and you've gotten started with the project, how do you keep track of the details to make sure that all of the details, you know, we talked about the scope of the project, to make sure that it stays within its scope, and to make sure that everything that you said was going to be done will be done, and the things that you aren't budgeted for don't get done? Right.
Basically, you set up the scope statement of the project, and part of the scope statement and what you want done is creating what we call a WBS, which is a work breakdown structure. Let's face it, there are times that you're going to miss something, because that's just the nature of being human. But with work breakdown structures, you're able to get to the details of the project. So you take, okay, I'm baking our cake. You know, part of the work that goes into baking the cake is I preheat the oven to 375 degrees. I mix the cake mix, and I put the eggs in. And so that is making that work breakdown structure so that you don't miss those details. And also, you consult your team. Your team is very important to have input into the WBS or their tasks that need to be done, because they've done it. You know, it may be different than how they did it before, and there might be some unknown factors, but most likely, if they've dealt with projects before, or they've done similar work.
So you've talked a lot about working with your team, keeping your team motivated, working with upper management, being able to get them on board. So what types of soft skills are necessary for a good project manager? Because the things that you're talking about have very little to do with hardware and software.
Right. And the soft skills that are totally necessary is leadership. Doing the right thing, having integrity as a project manager, knowing people. Like, again, there's a book that I recommend. It's Marcus Buckingham's Now Discover Your Strengths. Know the people that you're dealing with. Know when you as a project manager can't handle all the work. If you're weak in an area, know that you have to delegate those things. The soft skills, you know, approaching somebody differently, knowing conflict resolution, know when to you know, confront a situation versus compromising. You'll win concessions that way with your project team, and you won't burn bridges as you go along either.
So how important is it to really understand that team concept? And how would you describe a good working team concept?
A good working team concept would be when everybody's motivated to get the project done and work together. They have a clear objective, and they all work together for that common goal. Yeah, there might be some bumps in the road, and that's just human nature. But knowing they have a goal and an expectations, and everything's clearly defined for them, it makes it run a whole lot smoother.
Okay, how do you measure the success of a project?
The success of a project, basically, that is when the project is completed successfully with it meets the scope of the end user or the stakeholder, the project sponsor, the person that said I wanted meat and potatoes or pot roast for dinner. They got pot roast for dinner. You delivered what the customer wanted. You did it on time, within budget scope. of the project.
Okay. And to the degree of doneness that they wanted.
Yes, exactly. Well done versus medium rare.
So now, all of these different pieces, how do you keep track of all the pieces of the project? Is there particular software that you use, or are you still using composition books and writing everything down? Or?
Well, and that's a personal preference on what software you use, but it's also organizationally. What does your company have available to them? There are nice software suites, like I think there's one called Primavera or Niku Clarity that do these great reports, and they look good, and they have a web type where you log on the internet and you take you enter in your time and you track where the project is. Is it green? Is it on schedule? Is it budget? Or simpler projects require Excel. I mean or meeting notes. Some people with smaller projects, that's all you need is like, what are my action items? What do I need to get done? I make a list out, and some of those fit very well for smaller projects.
Okay, so what about deadlines? Do they change? And talk about, actually more interesting than that might be, keeping the deadline when the project changes, when things in the scope of the project change, and managing that change.
Mm-hmm. I love deadlines because I like having a goal, and and that's just my personality type, but deadlines are something that often you're given a date and you have to back into. But how you manage that is you create your project management plan, and you do that in the planning phase of your project. That tells you how you're going to go about doing your work and how you're going to do it and when you're going to do it, so that everybody knows when there's changes. How are you going to manage those changes? That's all part of the project management plan.
And how do you deal with team members who may not keep their commitments? I'm sure you've never really had that happen before. So if it should ever happen, how would you deal with it?
That often happens because with multiple priorities and priorities shift every day within an organization. First of all, you set the ground rules and set team expectations. Okay, if you're going to be late, tell me. Give me fair warning so that I can raise that up to my project sponsor and tell them, it's slipping because you didn't get your deliverable by X. You don't try to point anybody out. But if you're having a particular problem with one individual, you talk to that person, what's going on. You didn't realize they went on vacation, they might have had a death in the family, there might have been some personal issues there that you just have to manage through. But talking to that person, again, it goes back to those soft skills.
Okay. And what is project life cycle?
The project life cycle, basically those are 5 phases or process groups: initiating, planning, execution, monitoring and controlling, and closing. Initiating is when you're coming up with the preliminary scope statement and the project charter, like how are you going about making a business case for that project. Planning is where you build your project management plan. Part of that project management plan is subsequent plans, like, okay, how am I going to manage my cost? How am I going to manage my quality? How am I going to manage the risk? How am I going to manage the people of the project, and so forth and so on. So there's multiple plans that build your project management plan.
So talk a little bit about a business case. Why is it important, and what would be included in it?
Well, a business case is basically what that project sponsor has said is going to be the benefit of doing the project. Part of the business case is what's my return on doing the project. Again, if you have a compliance issue, then that is something that goes into your business case. If we don't implement this project, then I'll be fined by X agency at $500,000. There's certain risk that you build into your business case. If we don't get this done, this is what's going to happen, or if we get this done, we may gain this amount of revenue.
So it really is building a case for the project and basically saying this is important because.
Right.
And if it's a legal issue, then it's almost a non-issue. Huh?
Right.
So a lot of people are involved in projects sometimes. I can see that, especially in a large project. So when you have all of these people, you have all of these personalities, sometimes you may have personality conflict, so to speak. How do you manage that?
Basically, from the PMI standpoint, there is a process of conflict resolution, confrontation, collaboration, compromise, smoothing, or forcing an issue. You go through these different phases, and I personally think you should prevent conflicts from happening. Have discussions with that individual if there's conflicts, or maybe it's something the team members have to work out amongst themselves. If they sometimes have to agree to disagree, or come up with some kind of mutual benefit that comes out of the collaboration effort, trying to just resolve that conflict.
So what are some of the things that might keep a project from making it to completion?
Priority shifting, budget going away, resources not being available. That's a big thing, is the shortage of personnel that are qualified to complete your project, especially in some IT projects. You don't have that skill set sometimes to complete the project, or that knowledge isn't there, or it's not as mature as somebody that may have been there is no longer there.
Okay, tell me a little bit about PMI and the benefit of being a member of PMI, what it is, founded, what it does. Okay.
Well, PMI, there's a local chapter of PMI, and you can visit the local chapter's website at pmimemphis.org. It is basically an organization that promotes standards within project management. Have you ever heard of the ISO 9000?
Yes.
Or
standardizations, yes. Yes,
or ANSI. Those are both, the certification is backed by those organizations because they recognize PMI's project management methodology as one of the standards in the industry.
So how would a person go about being certified as once you get that certification, you're not PMI, are you? You're something else, right?
Yeah, it's another acronym.
PMP.
Project managers love acronyms.
Yeah. Well, that's because they're IT people.
So, the PMP, you can be a member of PMI to be PMP certified, or not a member of PMI. It's really your personal choice on that. But as far as project management professional, that is a certification that PMI, or a credential that PMI supports. First, when you are getting your PMP certification, there are certain eligibility requirements that go into getting the certification. If you have your bachelor's, it's 4,500 hours of project management experience, 35 continuing education units in project education, as well as 3 years of project management experience. If you don't have your bachelor's, it's 7,500 hours of project management experience, 45 continuing education units, and 60 months or 5 years of project management experience.
It sounds like something that's kind of hard to do.
Yeah, it can be. It could be an intensive process, but it is a certification that people recognize. There are people that will not hire project managers unless they have that PMP certification. So it's well worth it. It is, sometimes it can be a daunting task to fill out the application process, but with PMI Memphis, we do offer mentors to help you through that process too, and that's one of the benefits of being involved in PMI Memphis. You have a network of people that are so willing to help, and it's been a great working experience with the group because they know people that have skills, or we have the opportunities at the end of each chapter meeting, which meets the first Tuesday of every month at the Crescent Club, stand up and say, hey, I've got this opportunity. Does anybody know? Or we have volunteer opportunities for those that are PMP certified and those that are non-PMP certified, just to work with the chapter.
And as Vice President of Education, what do you do specifically for the organization?
I support a couple of different areas. The PMP certification, which is and credential exam preparatory classes that we run probably about once a quarter or every other month, depending on the year. And those dates are out on the website. I also assist with the academic outreach program, which we have built with the University of Memphis. We also partner with Christian Brothers University. One great thing that's recently happened with the chapter is that University of Memphis has an undergrad program now for project management.
Oh, okay.
So
that sounds great.
And then that was something that we helped them build, as well as mentor programs and people tracking their PDUs. Because once you get certified, you have to maintain your certification, and it's a test you never want to take again, ever.
So, if a person wanted to get into project management, how would they go about that?
Basically, project management is anywhere in organizations. You do project management with your church, maybe with your, I also lead the Girl Scouts, that's project management. So visit the chapter meetings and see what resources we have out there. We have extensive library at Christian Brothers University, as well as there are some classes at the universities that offer project management. So those are good introductory ways to get into project management.
So are there any books that you would recommend or websites or anything like that that a person could go to kind of find out if this is going to be a good fit?
Mm-hmm. Definitely. PMI.org, which is the global organization that we support, PMIMemphis.org. There are a couple of books. If you're interested in doing your PMP, there's what we call the Project Management Book of Knowledge, the PMBOK for short, another acronym. It's a real page turner. Yes,
I've heard of it.
If you manage to stay awake while reading it, let me know. But that is a great book that tells you about the methodologies and the framework of project management and the standard process that supports. As well as there's other authors. Rita Mulcahy is a big exam prep author that some of our teachers and instructors recommend, and Kersner. I can't recall the first name, but I can get that for you.
Well, tell me, how does business analysis relate to project management?
Basically, the project manager is who's the leader of the project and who has ultimate responsibility for that project being done. I associate the business analyst as being the person that works alongside of that project manager that really keeps track of the scope of the project. Some of the BA roles could be testing, helping documentate with documentation and writing the business requirements and defining those. So the line kind of gets blurry in some organizations, but there is a definite role differentiation between the BA and the PM.
So now you've mentioned several scenarios where, for lack of a better word, ordinary individuals manage projects like baking a cake, mm-hmm. or managing, being over the Girl Scouts, or what was the other one that you did just a few minutes ago? So how those types of things, kind of walk me through a small project that a normal person might be doing, that they're managing, and kind of point out the management steps and how they relate to the management steps in the workplace.
Well, basically, one of the examples could be the bake, where at the end of the day, I want the cake, and I have my recipe, and I know that I want chocolate frosting, and I go through the process of defining what my scope is, and that's saying I want the cake, and I want chocolate icing, I want yellow cake in the middle, and maybe some strawberries on top. So that's the scope. And then you plan that. That's planning that.
Make sure you have the ingredients.
And make sure I have the ingredients. Make
so those are the resources.
Yes, those are the resources. Do I have to go to the store and buy eggs or oil or whatever you make your cake out of? But that's my planning process. So I've initiated, I've planned. My execution, I'm mixing up my cake. I'm putting all my ingredients in. I've preheated my oven. And then as far as monitoring and controlling, I put it in the oven. I watch it, or I set the timer, and I go back and check it. Did it, is it light and fluffy? Is it, and then closing is, wrapping it up and putting the icing on.
And eating.
And eating, yes. And eating.
And then we have a project.
And we have a project,
yes. A completed project on budget and on time.
Exactly.
And I do thank you so very much. I believe that everyone can understand now how to manage a project. I really appreciate you coming tonight. And my guest has been Chandy Littlejohn, who is the Vice President of Education for the Memphis chapter of the Project Management Institute. I'm Nancy Ford, President of the Memphis chapter of BDPA. Thank you for watching.